it's curious, I think. Let's begin here. It's curious that God hasn't created a radically efficient world. That the productivity is not, it seems, the ultimate value in the world in which we live. Now, that you can go back and forth on this, but I'm just going to lay it out in broad terms to begin with. There is unnecessary beauty, unnecessary complexity, and unnecessary delight in the world. And I think one of the examples I use in the book is snowflakes. God could have made all snowflakes the same, chose not to. There's a rich variety in that particular moment of creation. But also, if we think about food, we have taste buds, we have a huge variety of food that God made. It is not beyond the power of an omnipotent God to create uniform pills that we pop, and to have no taste in that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a rich, luxuriant delight in tasting different food. And so it seems that the world that God has created is not radically inefficient, but it's not just efficient. It's not like a Le Corbusier house that's just a machine for living. It's not just geometric, to come back to your metaphor there, Adam. But there's superabundance. There's unnecessary, if we're thinking in pure productivity terms, dimension to creation. And that is just really, really curious from a Christian point of view. And you think, why has God done that? And I think it opens up onto a reality that is always more fundamentally than a drive for efficiency and productivity. But it's not that even in this world that God's created, efficiency and beauty are against each other. And this is another one of those false dichotomies. You've got on one hand, the aesthetics for aesthetics' sake, and then on the other hand, the pure, stripped down sort of productivity drive that has no frills at all. Both of those are heresies from a Christian point of view, because the world that God has created can't be reduced to a combination of efficiency and beauty any more than God's character can be reduced to a combination of fact and value. These things are enmeshed together in complex ways in the world that God has made. And so therefore, I think this gives a particular Christian take on the idea of beauty, what it is, how we relate to it, how we cultivate it, what place it has in our thinking. And it allows Christians to intervene into debates, for example, about architecture. How should we design buildings in urban settings and so forth, with a distinct voice, not just rehashing secular ideas and throwing in the odd Christian word here and there, but coming at it from a fundamentally Christian perspective. How do we think? How does the Bible think
Right.
about beauty?
Mm-hmm.
And then how does that enable Christians to intervene in these broader social debates,
Mm-hmm.
just to take one example about architecture, in a way that's not just repeating what other people are saying?
This raises a perennial issue. I mean, people hear that, and I agree. I mean, and I think Christians should enter into and be informed and stand upon and engage from a Christian position, because it's the one that corresponds with reality. It's the one that the Lord has given us. At the same time, some people might recoil. And this gets to a point, a question I've got for you, so bear with me for a second. But some people might recoil and say, oh, well, if there's a Christian way to do cultural criticism of architecture, is it the case where if we're all faithful Christians, we're all going to have the same answer in terms of what the most beautiful building is? And there seems to be this presumption that there is a correct way, meaning not just approach the subject, but there are correct and singular answers maybe to some of these questions as well. One person, a friend of mine, sometimes, in response to some of these questions, he says, well, are there Christian plumbers? Is there a Christian way to do plumbing that's different from an unchristian or non-Christian way? Well, if I'm going to think diagonally, as you suggest, yes and no. There are Christian ways to approach the subject, and there are also some similarities just in terms of the mechanics and things you do. But this raises the bigger question of Christians and culture and cultural critique from a Christian position, because some people view great continuity between Christians and the kingdom of God and the culture that we live in. Other people find an antithesis, and certainly we can find biblical passages, under certain readings and understandings that might lead us to believe that we should be engaging in a grand project of transformation. And that ultimately speaking, the Christian endeavor is going to win and transform all of culture. So we need to be in the business of redeeming everything that we possibly can. But then we also have passages, namely in Peter especially, which speak about the world burning up. And there's great discontinuity prior to the return of Christ. So where do you fall on this issue, if so as not to try to box you in, but how might you speak about some of these conflicts, and what's the position that you really advocate for here in the book?
Let me divide your question into two questions and deal with
parliamentary
architecture first
procedure.
and then antithesis second. I don't think you can credibly claim that there is one Christian architecture or one Christian art. I think that is hopelessly reductive. I like what Francis Schaeffer said about art, and I think it's helpful in this context, that there isn't one sort of style of art that is more Christian than another, and certainly not one style of art that is the Christian style. But it is likely that over time, an artist who is a Christian will express certain themes or patterns of thought and reality that correspond with their Christian view of the world. And the way that Schaeffer talks about this, I think, is a major and a minor theme. So that the Christian view of the world is that it is created by God, it is created good, it has fallen. That has not completely obliterated the goodness. So in other words, creation and fall are not symmetrical, and there is still good in the world, although everything now is tainted by sin, but also that it will be redeemed. And so one would expect, Schaeffer argues, over time for the complete oeuvre of a Christian artist to be rhythmed by that view of reality. Not that in every single piece of art that they produce, there's going to be a creation bit and a fall bit and a redemption bit. It's not as crude as that. But that you'd expect that to emerge over time. And so in that sense, I think you can say that there is art that is produced from and out of a Christian understanding of the world. But to reduce that to a particular style, I think is hopelessly reductive.